Well, good morning, church family. We are back in Genesis 1 again with yet another thing that we have to get right before we move forward. And this one is of utmost importance. We are going to take a look this morning, kind of continuing with that F theme. We are going to be taking a look at the foreman this morning. And I would love to call you to the passage that Justin read for us this morning in Psalm chapter 8, where it says, "When I look at your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars which you have set in place, what is man that you are mindful of him, and the Son of Man that you care for him?" And the question that David asked there is the classic question all men ask of what is man? What am I in relation to the impersonal machine of nature? Well, this morning we're going to be looking in Genesis at the creation of man. And I would like to read to you this morning as we begin Genesis a number of deathbed statements and statements in life of a couple of atheists and skeptics. Listen to these. Voltaire, French agnostic at best, maybe a deist. He said, "Strike out a few wise men, and the crowd of human beings is nothing but a horrible assemblage of unfortunate criminals. And the globe contains nothing but corpses. I tremble to have to complain once more of the being of beings, in which, casting an attentive eye over this terrible picture, I wish I had never been born." Friedrich Nietzsche, "Where is my home? For it do I ask and seek. I have sought but have not found it. O eternal everywhere, eternal nowhere, eternal in vain." And then one more, Mark Twain, an agnostic. He said this, "A myriad of men are born, they labor and sweat and struggle for bread. They squabble and scold and fight. They scramble for little mean advantages over each other. Age creeps upon them. Infirmities follow. Shames and humiliations bring down their prides and their vanities. Those they love are taken from them, and the joy of life is turned to aching grief. The burning of pain, care, and misery grows heavier year by year. At length, ambition is dead. Pride is dead. Vanity is dead, longing for releases in their place. And it comes at last, the only unpoisoned gift the earth ever had for them, death. And they vanish from a world where they were of no consequence, where they achieved nothing. They were a mistake and a failure and a foolishness, where they left no sign that they existed, a world which will lament them for a day and forget them forever. Then another myriad takes their place and copies all they did and goes along the same profitless road and vanishes as they vanish to make room for another and a million other myriads of men to follow the same arid path through the same desert and accomplished what the same first myriad and all of the myriads that came after it accomplished. Nothing. Be encouraged this morning, right? What a great outlook. And these guys, they were atheists. These are the free birds of history. They had no authority. They had no higher power. They were captains of their fate. They were masters of their own soul. And you would think, as man thinks out there in the world, that they would have died and ended their lives in great happiness, because everybody knows that God and Christianity are a drag. Having a higher authority is no fun. And yet these men who had no authority, they ended their lives in despair and depression. And the question that comes to us is why? How come? There are many scientists who can tell you what anything is. They can tell you how anything works, but they can't tell you why anything is here. And I can tell you from personal experience and history and what the Bible says that you will have no true joy in life unless you understand not what is there and how it works or just mere mechanics, but unless you understand why you are here. And more important, unless you understand who put you here, you will have no final joy in this life. You see, these men that I've read, they had depression because they were cosmic orphans. They spent their lives looking for something out there that gave them meaning, something that had their impression, some figure out there that looked like them, that gave them some kind of reference point, because they asked the question that David asks in Psalm 8, that when I consider the heavens and the works of thy hands, when I look at the machine of nature, I ask, what am I? Am I just a biomechanical machine? What gives me distinction from the rest of the machine of nature? Why do I cry when someone hurts? Why do I thrill when I see something beautiful? What makes me distinct from all of the non-moral out there? What is man? Now, whether you realize it or not, all of you in this room, you have to find an answer to that question. And your answer to give you true meaning has to be only one answer. And if it's not that answer, then we need to resign ourselves to despair. You have to find an answer for your meaning. And that answer is twofold. It has to be both infinite and it has to be personal. It must be a person. It must be an infinite what, and it has to be an infinite whom. So it must be infinite. Let's look at that one first. When your sons or daughters come to you, or when they eventually come to you one day as a young person, when they come to you and say, where did I come from? It's a very tough question to answer. But you look at them and you say, well, you came from mama and daddy, and your mama gave you birth. And they feel good about that because they see faces that kind of look like theirs. And they go, well, that's good, but where did you come from? And you say, well, I came from grandma and grandpa. Well, where did they come? Well, they came from great-grandma and great-grandpa. And you keep taking it back, right? And say you take it all the way back to Adam, and they go, well, Dad, where did they come from? Mom, where did they come from? What if you don't believe in God, a God that is Trinity? What do you say then? Well, son, honey, we were put here by aliens, right? And we chuckle at that, but that is an answer that is being given out there in our society. And then what must you ask? Where did E.T. come from? E.T. phones home. He gets lonely, right? Where did he come from? Well, from Mama and Daddy E.T. Well, where did they come from? Grandma and Granddaddy E.T. And you continually take it back. And where does it end up going? Where do you take it if you don't believe in God? You end up having to go back and say that we came from the inanimate goo. That's what we have to say. And when we come to that, we ask the question again, what is man that you are concerned with him? And with this idea, there is no thou and there is no man with a capital M. I am a biomechanical machine. I'm basically another slug on a leaf. That's all I am. Nothing. Nothing. That is all that you are. And the only reason that you hold to things like soul and heart and emotion and joy, it's just out of your past superstition that you believe. You are nothing. So it must be infinite. Because finite man can't give an infinite reference point because it pushes all the questions back. Where did he come from? Where did he come from? So your answers are going to have to be an infinite something, but it's also going to have to be personal. It has to be an infinite who. We have an infinite personal reference point that gives us as human beings meaning and dignity. And if you don't come to what the Bible says and what creation teaches of an infinite personal God, you will never ever have any answers. I mean, why don't we just say that our reference point is Jehovah? Why don't we just say that it's the one true God who is ultimate, authoritative, and creative? Because at that point, I'm not a cosmic orphan anymore. I have image. I am like God. I ask the question, what is man? And I have the answer. That creation is finite, but it is not personal. But I am finite, but I am personal. I have meaning in God. See, why don't I just come to that answer? Why don't we all? Why doesn't the world come to that answer? It's because we're rebels. Our flesh longs for Darwin. Give me Darwin. Especially when we want to sin, give me Darwin. When I want to steal, when I want to kill, lust, and covet, give me Darwin. When I want to hate, give me Darwin. But when I look at the Milky Way, when I look at the stars out there, when I hold a little newborn baby in my hands and see the wonder of that, at that point, what I need is Genesis. I need the truths that Genesis teaches me. And so this morning, I want to look at Genesis 1 and look at the enigma of the ages. See, you aren't going to get 26 verses into your Bible before God confronts you with the answer to what is man. And we'll now look at the foreman of creation. Verse 26, look there. It says, "Then God said, 'Let us make man in our image, after our likeness.'" And it raises the question, what does it mean to be in the image? What does it mean that I am a reflection of God? What is the image of God? Whatever it is, you don't find it in animals, and it's not there, but it's present in man, and it is present in God. God is infinite. Everything beneath him is finite, man, animals, everything. But God is not only infinite, but he is personal. He is loving. He is tender. And in relation to God, everything is impersonal except for one thing in our universe. And that one thing is on the level of God. He is not equal with God. Don't hear me wrong on that. But he is personal on the level with God. That God is a person and we have personhood. And that comes from the image of God in man. This is why in our present day, and with the evolutionary philosophy that is prevalent in our day, that we have tampered with the dignity of man so greatly. Because if you don't hold to man corresponding to an infinite being that is personal and loving and moral and all of those glorious qualities that we hold glorious in man, what do I do? If there is no God, what do I do about things like reason? What is my reason? B.F. Skinner, the atheist, said this: "Your mind is not reasonable. It is an organ that secretes thought like your liver secretes bile. And now your mind is not really reasonable. You just do what you're programmed to do." Do I have a soul? I mean, if there is no God that we are made in the image of, what do you do with this question? Freud says that you don't have a soul. That is an archaic superstition. that you have an animal instinct, not a soul, that erects barriers of how people should treat you for self-preservation of the species. That is your soul. See, he makes it materialistic, biochemical, biomechanical. And see, this is what happens when you get rid of God. When you say that God is dead, you are dead. There is no man. You are protoplasm is all that you are. You don't think, you have senses that take in sensory things and feed them into this organ that gives you a programmed response like an animal. But you don't think. You do what you're programmed to do. There is no morality. It's an animal instinct of the species. If God is dead, I am dead to you, and you don't know how to treat me, and you are dead to yourself. Do you see where this carries you? If God is dead, you lose touch with life. You lose touch with God, with each other, with yourself. You turn into a basket case, is what happens. So we are in an image of God. I was a cosmic orphan, but I came home when I found Jesus Christ. So now, as soon as you find out that we're in the image of this God, what is the question that we have? We have to figure out what kind of God that he is. Question. If I am in the image of God, that means that God is like me to an extent, right? I mean, obviously, he is infinite and I am finite, so there are some obvious differences between us and God. But there is a reflection of the personhood of God in me. So with that in mind, think about it. How do you feel when you're alone? How do you feel? You're all by yourself. How do you feel? You get bugged. You get lonely. See, the first time in the Bible that the phrase not good is used, it's toward aloneness. It's not good for man to be alone. Let us make a helper suitable for him. So if you're in the image of God, if he is like you and you are like him, and you don't like being alone, then it stands, and this is the next thing on our outline, it stands that God would be a God of intimate relationship. Well, if that's the case, what was God doing before the creation? Was he just twiddling his thumbs by himself? Is he lonely? I mean, you get lonely. What does that tell you about God? It tells you have to conclude that God has a weakness, that he was lonely, and God made you and needed the universe, and by classical definition, that would make him not God anymore. Because a true God has no weakness. A true God doesn't need anything. And we know that that's not the God that we serve. So what are we going to do if we are created in the image of God? We have personhood. We don't like being alone. Well, there are a number of characteristics in the image of God that are present in all of you. Mind, intellect, will, emotion, creativity. We have the image of God in us. But we are also personal. We communicate. And if we are like God, what that means is that before creation, he must have been lonely, right? He must have been weak. He needed us, so he created us, right? Wrong. He didn't need us. Why? Because he is Trinity. He is a God of unity and diversity. I've quoted Francis Schaeffer a few times during our study here in Genesis. And they asked Dr. Schaeffer one time, Dr. Schaeffer, do you believe in the Trinity? As a Christian philosopher, do you believe in the Trinity? And Schaeffer said this, if the Bible did not teach the Trinity, the fact that there is one God with eternal plurality of persons that has love for each other, the unity of God, with diversity, Trinity, then I would still be an agnostic. And he said that because the universe, if there was no Trinity, no Trinitarian God, if he was not three in one, then the universe would have been created as much for God in his weakness, and at that point, he would have no longer been God. And he said to that, I would have become an agnostic. But we know that the Bible doesn't teach about a God who is lonely and about a God who is weak. And with that, I would like for you to look at verse 26. And in verse 26, when you look at those pronouns, initially they can be confusing. But if these pronouns are not in Genesis and supported throughout the rest of the scriptures, a belief in one God as creator and ruler would be extinct. Believe me, there would be an extinction of that idea. See, the Trinity tells me that my personability and desire to communicate with others, that is eternal, because he is one God who is diverse in three people. And personhood, love, unity, tenderness, those are not things that originated in Eden. They are things that have always been there in a Trinitarian God from eternity past. Well, look at verse 26. And as we go through, note your pronouns. As soon as you are told that you are in the image of God, he tells you what kind of God in whose image we are. Notice in 26, let us, plural, make man in our image, according to our likeness. He hits you 3 times right there in about 10 words. And what he is saying is that I am a plural being. I always love. I am always tender. I always communicate. And let them have dominion. And what does it say there in verse 27? You see unity. You see singularity. So God, singular, created man in his singular own image. My wife teaches English to some homeschoolers. She will be aware of this, and many of you out there that are English scholars will know this. You've studied English grammar. The pronoun has to coordinate to its antecedent. If it's a singular noun, then you have to have a singular pronoun. Any English teacher knows this. So then with that, where does Moses get off? And what is God doing, inspiring him to write this way? God created him in his image, singular. Let us, our. Where does he get off doing that? It's because God is unity. He is one God, but he exists in 3 persons. Let us make man in our image. Now, the Trinity, it's a troubling doctrine, right? We all have struggled to try and explain it to somebody else. But if you didn't have it, if you didn't have this doctrine of the Trinity, you would have the extinction of true Christianity, because you would have nothing to coordinate your personhood to. Nothing. And that is why I can't hold to a system of theology that denies the deity of Christ. And it's not just because the Bible teaches it. I can't hold to a religion that has one God in singular person, because that tells me that he is weak and he needs the universe and he has nothing to coordinate in me as far as my personhood. Because then it originated with me, and that simply does not work. And so the first 2 things that we see, I have a counterpart in the image of God who is unity and diversity. And that gives the universe meaning. And it gives all of us dignity. Dignity. So don't try to explain the Trinity. Just worship it. Glory in it. Because if it's not there, you are not there, and the universe is not there. We'll keep looking there in verse 26. Something else. There is, and it's the next thing on our outline, there is a mandate toward man. He gets to do something that no one else gets to do. He gets to rule. He is the king. It says there in 26, let them have dominion over the fish of the sea and over the birds of the heavens and over the livestock and over all the earth and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth. And he says it again down there in verse 28. Look there. A cultural mandate, subdue the earth, that we are the kings. See, this is why man is like he is, right? Why does man sit in a tree stand for hours on end trying to shoot that big buck so that he can turn him into a shoulder mount and hang him on the wall? Why does he do this? It's so that people can walk in and he goes, see the creation? I subdued him, right? Why do you catch that 10-pounder out of Chickamauga and take him to the taxidermist and stick him on your wall? See him? You wouldn't believe the fight that he put up, but it wasn't hard enough. I caught him. I subdued him. Or that bearskin rug. Man, he was big, but he wasn't big enough. Right? And why does this happen? We have to dominate. Why do you have to dominate? Why do men have to climb Mount Everest? You can't do anything on Everest. You can't even breathe on Everest. People go and try to climb up there and they die on the way and they can't even bring them down. There's like frozen bodies on the side. Why do people try to climb Mount Everest? It's because we're men. We're trying to subdue the earth. Why do people have to try to get all the way down to the bottom of the Mariana Trench? It's because there's catfish down there that don't have any eyeballs. And if they're there, then by golly, I got to get there too. Right? I got to subdue the earth. And that is the way that we are. That is why men are naturally competitive. And I can continue with stories on stories, but we have to continue. Look at verse 27. Look there. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them. What does this tell you about woman? This tells us that she is a fellow heir in the grace of life, that she is an equal of man. But do you know what happens in religions where you don't have a Trinity God? Where you have gods that are idols, ultimately in a Hindu system, where it is just the infinite universe with no purpose or personality. Ultimately, in Hinduism, it comes down to the fact that there is no basis for infinite morality and God is not personal. He is just part of nature. And ultimately, the law is the law of nature, which is the survival of the fittest. In the survival of the fittest, who's going to win? A man or a woman? The man is, because we're bigger, stronger, faster. If there is not God in the survival of the fittest, all you ladies out there are in trouble. I mean, think about it. If there's one drumstick, and it's you ladies and McCosh, Justin McCosh, you're a goner. That dude's taking your drumstick. You know what I'm saying? And what is my point? If you take away the infinite personal God, women are not women anymore. Peter said, you husbands, grant your wife honor as a fellow heir in the grace of life. And in those other countries, women quite often are not seen as distinctive. Because Christianity sees men and women as distinctive in the home and in the church. Different roles, different responsibilities, but equal in glory and in dignity. But if you remove God, like in the countries that we're talking about out there, women get degraded because the law of the jungle prevails. The only thing that gives man or woman any dignity is God himself. And that woman could have looked at this text in verse 27 and wrote in a true biblical sense, women's liberation. She would have looked at this text and seen it as revolutionary, because the liberation of a woman is the creativity of a trinity, of man and woman in his own image. So woman gets elevated in a true biblical worldview. They are fellow heirs of the grace of life. Our dignity comes from God. And if you remove God, all that we are animals. Well, in verse 29, let's keep moving. Here's your last point. You see our points. You have imagery, that we have a Trinity, that we are in the image of, and we have a cultural mandate to rule. And fourthly, we see the equality of male and female. And in verse 29, what do you see? You see stewardship. Man owns nothing and is responsible for all. See, in verse 29 and 30, he puts man over all things. But animal and man are together in one respect, and that is in their dependence on God. Look at verse 29. And God blessed them, and God said to them, be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the heavens, and over every living thing that moves on the earth. And God said, behold, I have given you every plant yielding seed, and that is on the face of all the earth, and every tree with seed and its fruit. So it is given. You don't raise it. You didn't create it. It is a divine gift to us. And in verse 30, that animal, it gets the same thing. Look there. And to every beast of the earth, and to every bird of the heavens, and to everything that creeps on the earth, everything that has the breath of life, I have given every green plant for food. So to the animals are given the same thing. On one level, we are on the same level of animals, and that is in regard to our dependence. I mean, do you understand the air that you breathe? Do you fully understand that? It was the second day of creation. We know that from our study. But you don't understand it, and I don't either. But God has given us air. Without him, you have no air to breathe and you die. If plants don't grow, you die. If meteors start falling, you die. If animals aren't there, we die. We are stewards. We don't own anything. We are ultimately helpless outside of the caretaking of God. And when you think about that, that just humbles you, doesn't it? So we have been given stewardship over all of this. Well, I need to conclude here. And I'll conclude with this. If you should be here this morning and you don't know God, if you don't know who he is, if you don't know him, you are a cosmic orphan. And there are some of you in here this morning that are just that. And if you lie on your bed at night, when all the facade of how strong you are and how tough you are and all of that, everything that you have made, all that you have accumulated, when all of that is laid aside, and you lay in your bed at night and you look out the window at the stars, and in a moment of honesty, you admit that you don't know who you are. If that is you this morning, I would like to give you a clue. And I mean that in a very literal way. Do you know what a clue is? It's actually a Greek term for a ball of thread. A clue. C-L-E-W-E. And the reason that they got the word clue is from old Greek mythology. There was a great dark labyrinth that went way back into a mountain, and there was a great horrible beast called a minotaur. And anyone that came into the maze, into the labyrinth to get him, would lose their way in the dark, and they would never get out, and they would fall prey to that animal. And the Minotaur captured the princess of Crete, and he held her in his labyrinth. And this great hero, Theseus, went in to get her. But before he went in, he took a clue. It was a ball of thread, and he tied it to the outside and unwound it into the darkness. And no matter how dark or how bad it got, he was able to find his way out. And he killed that monster, took the princess out, and what is it they say? They lived happily ever after. And that is where we get our term, clue. It is when a person is in the darkness, but they have nothing to hold, or they have something to hold on to in order to lead them out. And if you don't know Jesus Christ, if you don't know the God that is Trinity, if you don't have answers to the ultimate questions of the unity and diversity of the universe and the personhood of man, and by classic definition, if you don't know those things, you don't have a clue. You are without a clue. But I'll give you the single strand that runs throughout the Bible, a scarlet thread of dignity of man in the image of God that is triune yet unity. And he has provided his Son to die and to pay for what your sin created. You violated a standard that is as infinite as God himself is a standard that has been there with God through eternity. And it is a standard of justice, of holiness, of purity. And the debt for breaking that standard must be paid. And it was paid in the crucifixion of the second member of that Trinity. And Jesus Christ came and he died for you. And he rose to show that that payment was valid in time and space and in history. And I would invite you this morning to accept Jesus Christ. And by accepting him, you would have the thread that gets you out of the maze and into the light of the domain of Jesus's dear, or God's dear Son, Jesus Christ. Let him give your life eternal bearing. It is there if only you would take it. You can have a clue, and you will find that there is a way out of the darkness of this world. And I can tell you, after I rested in Jesus Christ, everything made sense in an instant. And that kind of peace awaits you too. That is what you can have if you are willing to acknowledge the sovereignty of God. It is either that or you will remain a rebel in despair. Well, let me pray for us. Father, I just want to thank you this morning for the opportunity that we have had to look at this text, to answer the question, what is man? What makes him unique? What makes him not just another slug on a leaf, but what makes him special? What gives him dignity? What gives woman dignity? What gives him stewardship? The entrustment of all creation. And it is you, God. And you would choose to have relationship with us if only we would surrender our lives to you after Christ has given his life for us. And this morning I pray for us in this room that maybe we have seen what you have done for the first time, creating us in your image so that we might be able to have relationship with you through your Son, Jesus Christ. And I pray this morning that as believers, we would see that you have made a way for us, even from eternity past, and that you have given us a way. You have given us a clue. You have given us a way out of darkness and into the light, and we are grateful. But God, I pray for those in this room this morning that don't have a clue, that have not had a way out of this dark life that they have been living, would you transfer them now from the domain of darkness into the kingdom of your dear Son? Would you capture their heart this morning? And so, God, I pray that as we sing, that you would meet with us now, that you would help us, give us the courage to respond as you see fit. It's in the name of Christ I ask these things.